All right. So what is digital marketing? In my way of thinking, it's a set of activities that makes it possible for your buyers to figure out whether they want to buy your product, right? Um, and so, you know, it's how do they identify with you? How do you put opportunities for action in front of your buyers? How do they find you? And ultimately, it allows you to evaluate the effectiveness of your messaging and campaigns. And digital marketing provides some new opportunities that are less expensive, but it's not free, right? You're going to trade in some cases money for time. And anyone who's run their own business knows there isn't enough time to do everything you want to get done. So I like to think of it this way. This is the startup challenge, right? There's a lot to do. And unless you're already throwing off cash, you probably don't have minions to do all your work for you, right? So what we're going to talk about are some things that you can do that don't cost a lot and hopefully don't take a tremendous amount of time, that will allow you to get your message in front of more people who can do something with it. So when I think about the marketing work that we're doing, it's really going to be focused around three things, right? It's who are the customers that we want to have? What kind of promotion is this group of people going to respond to? And what's the content I'm going to use to create that reaction, right? And so it's really critical that we start with a clear idea of two things, right? What is our product or service, and who do we think the customer is? Because it's really important that we target the messaging in the appropriate way. And the truth of this is not digital marketing. This is just marketing, right? So some digital conversion information, right? If I have a good salesperson, historically, they can probably convert 30 to 50% of their qualified leads to sales. But if I'm doing digital marketing, digital sales, the latest survey that I looked at says that the e-commerce website conversion rate in the US is 2.63%. So the trade-off with going to digital marketing is that we're on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We can reach every part of the globe, but we're going to have a much lower conversion rate, which means our activity level has to be higher than it would be in the real world, the non-digital world. And that, you know, if you go down a paid per click path, this is actually not that inexpensive a mechanism for getting activity, right? So across a bunch of different industries, I went and looked at the data that's out there, and the average cost per action is almost $60, right? So if you go down this route, and an action really is getting someone to your site and having them do something, right? So that's one person. So if you go the AdWords route, this is something you want to keep in your mind as you start thinking about, well, what is the cost of promotion and how do I plan for it? So I did a little exercise. I went out and I went to Google, and I did everything but sign us up for this so I could get the pricing, right? And so using the Google AdWords and their wizard, in order for us being Minneapolis business mentors, to get, say, 860 ad clicks, it would cost us $882 a month, right? An ad click will drive traffic to our site, and with a 2.6% average conversion rate, this will result in 22 conversions per month. So how might that work out as a business modeling exercise? right? So here's my little Hypo company. And you'll see the spreadsheet on the right. And the left-hand column is just taking the data that I got from doing the AdWords work, right? So if we had 860 click-throughs and we did a 2.6% conversion, we'd get 22 conversions. Now, let's assume I had a product I could sell and I would sell it for $128 each. So my revenue would be $2,862. I'd have to remove my ad cost and whatever the product cost is. So I've got a pretty inexpensive product here because that's my total cost for the product for the month. And I'd have a gross profit of $1,500 roughly. And then of course, if I'm gonna actually pay myself so I can eat, and I'm pretty cheap, right? At this kind of velocity, I'm gonna lose 2,500 bucks a month, right? So what are my options for improving this, right? Well, I could improve my conversion rate, but without doing a lot of work, I shouldn't forecast that, right? So let's just assume though we did improve our conversion rate. Where would we have to get to be roughly break even? We'd have to more than double our conversion rate, right? And 5.5% is not unachievable, but it means that you have a clear plan, you know how to evaluate what you're doing, so that you get increases over time, right? And at 5.5% conversion, we have a company that's breaking even. It's clearly not one that's making a lot of money or throwing off a lot of cash, right? So if that's not our option, then our others are, right, lower our product cost, raise our product price, or find other cheaper ways to source traffic so I can save my $822, right? So when I work with people, I spend a lot of time looking at free strategies for them, who, you know, particularly for startups, because this is a pretty expensive way to try to get traffic. And unless you have someone who's going to give you a bunch of money or you're already flush with cash, it's probably not a realistic path to go down. But I thought we'd go through it just so you have some background. All right, so let's go back to the general process. So we're going to start with who are our customers, what message will they respond to, how will they get your message, how will they shop, and how frequently will they return. So we're going to do a little exercise here. All right. What I find for a lot of people I deal with is they want to get right to the marketing, right? So they want to create a campaign, they want to get to people, and you can tell if you're in this camp, right? Is, you know, if you're tempted, if the first thing you start thinking about is PPC, AdWords, SEO, right? So let's do a little exercise, right? So here's a couple example brands. I just went and pulled data from their website. So this is what you get if you Google Mercedes or you Google Toyota, right? And the feedback I want from you, right, is, you know, tell me something. What can you pick up from looking at these landing pages? Tell me something about their product. Tell me who they're trying to target.
They're trying to target people who want to buy a Mercedes. They got nice Mercedes cars. They try to showcase their new cars.
Right, but you know, an example on a Mercedes, right, is can you even see a product?
Yes.
You just see the badge, right? So to me, right, what you have on the left with Mercedes is they're selling something other than a product that they want you to resonate with, right? Whereas on the Toyota side, it's really interesting, right? What are they leading out with? We've got financing options for you. You can see several different vehicles, right? So to me, what I see when I look at these two things is the people on the right they're pitching to someone who what I would call is value conscious. Price matters, right? On the left-hand side, it's kind of like, well, the product really isn't that important and the price certainly isn't. right? So it's much more of a aspirational pitch, right? That Mercedes is a brand and it's a very exclusive brand. So it's a luxury mark, right? So I guess the following question that I would have for folks is, you know, are they going to see the same people for their products? Right? Is someone who shops at Toyota also shopping at Mercedes?
Different people.
Right.
I think
Right.
different people as well too. Because
Yeah.
if people see that they're able to finance, they have finance options, they're more likely to go to that one.
If they're price conscious, right?
Yeah.
If you're loaded with cash and it's all about making a statement,
Mhm.
you're probably going to go to that Mercedes site,
Right.
right? So this is why it's important to understand who your buyer is as you start down this path, who your potential buyer is, because they're going to respond to different messages and different art, different graphics, everything. And so um, this is an extremely important thing for you to work your way through as you start thinking about it. It's like if you're going to invest the money to build a website, to do a marketing campaign, we'd like to know that we're targeting the right people with the right message so that we get the most bang for the buck, right? So I got a little exercise for you. I'm going to shut up for about 5 minutes here. And I want you to think about, you know, who is your customer? And just sort of write out a single paragraph, but describe their gender, their age, their income, where they live, what their living arrangement is, and what you think, you know, what you're trying to do that drives their purchase behavior. Sorry about that. Oh, sounds like someone's already finished. Thought I heard a pen get put down. We'll go one more minute. Okay. So does anyone want to volunteer and talk about, um, you know, who they think their customer is? We're
I will.
all kind of, okay, go for it.
We're going to be targeting probably, or it's not probably, mostly females in the 30 plus age group that are health conscious and who are of average to high income, and probably in some of the more wealthy suburbs of the Twin Cities is where we'll start.
And the product is?
We're going to sell an ion producing air purifier that'll kill viruses and kill allergies and things like that.
Do COVID-19 in, huh?
Yeah.
Nice. Anyone else want to talk about their customers?
I go. So I will be selling clothes. It's a boutique. My customers are mainly going to be females, 17 plus. I feel like the income would be not only just high class, but I feel like middle class, like that make about 30,000 a year, I would say.
Okay.
Maybe even less. I mainly want to reach people in the US, but the goal is for anywhere. I don't want to limit where they can, where my products can reach. What drives their purchase would be females that like to stay in the loop with fashion, that like to stay up to date, that likes the go-to look all the time, that's fashionable. Whether it's
Okay.
dressing up or dressing down,
Mm-hmm.
that like all eyes is on them when they walk in the room all the time. That's what would drive them to buy my products.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. So here's something to think about, right? Do you really know who your customers are? And do you know what they want? Right? So in working with lots of people, and I'm guilty of this myself, I find I'm basically a software engineer by training, and I tend to think a lot about product features. And it turns out for a lot of selling or purchase decisions that features really aren't a primary driver of purchase behavior. They help, but it's often a second or third level part of the decision-making process, right? For the majority of people who buy things, it's more an emotional exercise than it is a cognitive exercise. And features really are, for the most part, they're more about the logical part of the purchase decision. So when you're thinking about getting people to do something, I think one of the things to really focus on is, can I tell a story to elicit some emotions, and can I plug into something that they want? It's an emotional exercise more than it's a technical or a logical exercise. And I've done high-end consulting work, and when I first started, I did a lot of work by trying to do return on investment, right, which is a pretty cognitive exercise. And what I found is there were a few people who would make a decision on that, but what was much more important to them is, do I trust this guy? Does he have a history of success? can I talk to someone who's already done this? Those are less about the technical capabilities that I bring to the table and the fact that nobody wants to take a risk on someone they don't know. And they're trying to figure out, well, do I know someone who's done work with this guy that I can talk to them and they've had some success with? So when you're thinking about your product and you're thinking about marketing, the features are great, but more important, I think, is to really figure out, okay, well, what fears and you know, what emotions can I plug into to get people to do something? Because that's more likely to elicit action. All right, we're gonna get, and so I say that, and then we're gonna just like drop into a bunch of technical stuff. Any last questions, observations on the last set, on the last piece? Okay, so again, I'm gonna focus on promotion. If you think about what promotion is trying to do, right, it's trying to increase the level of traffic that you're interacting with, whether that's on a website or your phone or a social media listing that you have, a white pages listing, any of these things. What we're trying to do with promotion is we're trying to increase the level of traffic that's hitting whatever the landing places that you want them to go to, right? And the typical strategies are listings, advertising. In the digital world, you hear a lot of this thing called SEO, which is search engine optimization. And so listings and advertising to me are mostly passive. We're going to be in some source and you're counting on people to look at the source and come to you based on something about that listing. Campaigns are more active. So typically we're going to do a campaign. In the digital world, you can get pretty focused. So it's hopefully you've got some traffic and you're going to go back to people that you know with a targeted message, or you're going to figure out how to target a group that is a potential buyer for you with a message that's specific to them. And then finally, you're going to want to measure, because not everything works. And the more experience I get, the more I realize that it's really hard to figure out exactly what people want without experimenting. And so, when I was younger, we do lots of focus groups, and focus groups are interesting, but they're typically not that predictive of purchase behavior. And so what you'll find the sophisticated marketing people doing is something called A/B testing, which is they won't do a campaign, they'll do multiple campaigns, and they're going to look at the performance of each campaign against all the others, and they'll drop the things that are slow and they keep the things that are moving. And so there's this constant try something, compare it against what you have. If it wins, that's the new thing. If it doesn't, you keep what you have and you try something new. So you're constantly experimenting with, well, will this work? Will that work? What's the thing that's going to drive the traffic? So in talking about listings, there's a number of ways that you can list, right? So you can go to a listing specific site, Home Advisor, Google Business, the online Yellow Pages as an example. Those are the obvious places, right? But more powerful for you maybe is other websites where your customers visit, right? So in our case, we're a volunteer organization, and if we could get banks to list us because they have customers who could use our services, if we could get like the Small Business Administration federal site to list us, those are pretty powerful. Those are pretty powerful, right? Because it's the people that we want to talk with are already there, and you get sort of the glow from that site saying, hey, you should consider these people, right? So the bank, if you get on the bank site, if that's what you're going to do, is going to vet you before they put you up there, and you're kind of getting a little piece of their brand when you're there, right? Another place that can be very useful to you are social media sites, right? So it's a different way to sort of play the game, right? In a social media site, people are there because that's where they want to be, right? Whether it's Facebook or Twitter or, there's just a lot of different social sites. And if you really start to think about and look at the traffic at the social media sites, you may find your customers tend to favor a particular social media site. So, my advice again is start with your customer and try to figure out where might they be. So instead of listing yourself or trying to be active in 25 social media sites, maybe you can narrow that down to one or two. But it means really starting with, well, who do I think my buyer is and where are they likely to be? Because that allows you to focus your energy. Yep. All right. So in the digital world, right, you put your site up, we put our site up, right? And we're one of like billions of sites that are up, right? So the question is, well, why would anyone come to your site, right? And so, how are they going to find you, right? And one of the ways you can, of course, is like Google search. Google owns 90+% of all search traffic in the world. And so the question, is like, when they search, how are they going to find you via search, right? So let's use our business as an example, right? So it's Minneapolis Business Mentors, and we're going to type in a search term, right? So I typed in Minneapolis Business Mentors in the search bar, right? And the result of that is this page on the right, right? In marketing terms, what you can see when you land on a site is called being above the fold, right? So when you land on the site, all the data that you can see, all the information you can see is above the fold. And what's interesting is when you do a search, as I did, we're actually, the fourth listing on this page. Two of the listings are actually ad driven, so someone paid money to get the listing. There's another volunteer organization who's actually, we know, is spending a fair amount of money on ads, and then us, right? In the past, when I've done a search like this for a different business, when I wasn't above the fold. In fact, I was pretty far down. I was 30th, 35th on the search results, right? So in this particular case, we're above the fold, which means if someone does a search on this set of terms, they see our business, they don't have to scroll. It's a pretty ideal place to be, given that this was done without spending any money, right? So our business shows up. It's the first non-advertised listing on this page. And the question I have for you is, if you search for your business, where do you appear in the search results? Right. So let's talk a little bit about the games you can play with listings and search to improve your search position. Right. So in our particular case, what we did was we picked a business name that was search friendly and was very targeted. Right. So if you search for business mentors, you're doing a worldwide search. It's not at all geographically limited. Right. And when the decision was made to do this, there's a lot of internal debate around, really, do we, we could take people from St. Paul, we could take people from greater Minnesota. Why would we pick Minneapolis? Why would we put that in the name, right? And when you look at the search results, here's one of the things, here's one of the reasons why, right? By geographically limiting the search, it means we're higher up in our local market, right? So when you're thinking about search, there's a couple different games you can play around names and elements that people will search on to limit the scope of the search, right? So instead of searching for business mentors everywhere, we've geographically limited. That's one strategy. Another would be, is there a way to limit the search by some product characteristic, right? So can I pick, instead of saying soup, maybe we could say, cheese and broccoli soup, right? It's like, is there a product feature? Is there some element that's important to the buyer that they can search on that's going to get you a higher listing, right? Beyond that, what we did is when we built the site, we built it on Wix. We actually spent a fair amount of time. Wix has an SEO recommendation engine that we deployed, and it told us how we should change the site in terms of the language we used in the headers and keywords to improve search friendliness, right? So that's something you can do when you're constructing your website or any other content that you're producing to make your site more search friendly, right? We also added our site to Google Analytics and then listed the site on Google My Business, right? The reason we added it to Google Analytics is we can look as often as we want at what the traffic is, where the traffic's coming from. I'll show you that in just a second. But these are things you can do that don't cost you that much money. It costs you time to improve your search result. So on the right, you can see this is Google Analytics. And by doing that work, this little pie chart breaks down how are people finding you, right? So in our particular case, 23% of people found us through organic search. That means they did a search, and that's the percent of the total traffic that came to our website based on just on search. Now, what's interesting, right, is almost half of our traffic was direct. And then we're going to talk in a little bit, 15% of the traffic comes from social sites, right? Now, in our particular case, we're a volunteer organization, and we can do lots of things that might be hard for you to do, right? Because setting this up took almost 2 FTEs worth of effort to build a digital infrastructure. And then we're expending a fair amount of effort to keep the content up to date, right? We can do it because we have the skills and we're volunteers. I mean, if we had to pay for this on a marketing basis, this would cost us a lot of money. So this is one of the things I come back to is this is good. Just remember, if you have limited time, you don't necessarily need a website for promotion, right? So I'll give you an example of myself. When I started my business, actually both times when I started my business, I didn't have a website, right? I do high-end consulting, and all I had was a LinkedIn listing. Right now, I can make my business work, because of the rates I'm able to charge and the fact that in a year, I might have to do exactly one contract to make things work, right? So for me, it's like I could build the website. I have the skills. I've done it multiple times for different companies. But for my business, it's almost like a vanity project as opposed to a necessary must-have. In Antonia's case, that she may be going down a different path because it sounds like she wants to do digital retail. She wants people to be able to buy stuff online. You're not going to do that from LinkedIn. You got to have a digital website that supports online shopping, right? So different business, totally different needs. You're going to end up in a different place. So another thing to think about as you go through this is just because other people have a website isn't a reason for you to have a website. If your business requires it, great, go for it. If not, use your resources as well as you can. Again, you're not going to be able to do everything that people who don't know your business will sort of broadly recommend. We'll stop for a minute just in case there's any feedback. All right, hearing none, I'm going on. All right, so your website is not a promotion tool. It's a destination, right? So think about in the real world, the equivalent to your website might be a physical storefront, right? So your storefront really isn't a promotion tool. It's where people come to shop, right? So think about if you think about your website that way, then you'll separate your promotion from the website. So again, if you have really limited resources, then I would focus on promotion because that's what's going to generate the traffic. And, you know, I could use LinkedIn as a landing point. I could use a Google My Business listing as a landing point. I don't need to go through the expense of a website if it's not important. However, the exception here is digital retail is the primary exception to this rule of thumb, right? Because your whole business is a digital business driven off a website. All right, digital promotion, right? How can we do it? Well, we could do targeted ads, but we can also use social sites, right? And what your messaging is really is going to be, depending on what you do it could be a mail out campaign, it could be site posts, it could be video calls, right? Where are you going to direct into? That's really going to be dependent on your business, right? It could be a website, it could be a Google listing, literally it could be a phone number, right? It just depends on what you're trying to do, the volumes that you need, the kind of business you're building. Right, so let's talk about social sites for a minute. As their name is, you know, there's like, I don't know, at this point, there's probably 1,000 plus social media sites, right? There are many social sites, and it's a place where people of like interests go, right? So when I think of social media sites, you know, it's like Facebook, LinkedIn, Tumblr, Pinterest, Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, you know, WhatsApp. There's just a huge number of sites. And that's the minus. The plus is not every site attracts every user. And so there's this sieving process that's going on, and that may play to your advantage if you have limited resources, right? So in our particular case, we're a business, we do business mentoring, and where we tend to focus on is LinkedIn, Facebook, and Meetup, right? And you're going to say Meetup, what the heck is Meetup? And we'll cover that in a couple slides. So how do we leverage social media sites and social networks, right? So if you have, you know, if you're on LinkedIn, so I'm going to use LinkedIn as an example. I have roughly 500 connections in my LinkedIn network, right? So if I post something, guess what? Those people will see what I post, right? Which is great, but you know, if I'm getting a 2% conversion on 500, what's that? One person? You know, it's just not, oh, it's maybe 10 people a month, right? Or might do something off of that post, right? The beauty of social networks, though, is there's lots of people that you know who might do something for you, right? So the little game we play in our business is because we have multiple volunteers, one of us will post and then others of us will repost or will like. And what happens when they do that, right, is that post gets sent to a new group of individuals, the group of individuals who posted, right? So say Dennis Bingham posts, and then I see that post and I repost that or I like it. Well, now it's going to get to my network. So if Dennis has 500 and I have 500, guess what? That's 1,000 people that just saw that post, right? So just like in the real world, relationships are really important, and you want to figure out how to leverage relationships where you can. And social networks make that easier because things happen faster. and you can leverage someone else's social network if they're willing to post on your behalf. Right now, what's really crazy about social networks is most of them have pretty sophisticated algorithms for putting content in front of people. So say I posted and 100 people reposted my post, right? That might get the attention of the algorithms that track what's known as trending posts, right? So if a post trends, the social media site itself might repost it to lots of different feeds because they're looking at it going, oh, people are finding this content is interesting. And now you're not talking about 500 or 1,000, you might be talking 100,000, a much bigger number, right? So again, what we're trying to do when we play in these social networks is we're trying to get people to help us by reposting our content, right? Now, a paid way to do that is to go find an influencer, right? So these are people with huge networks who they're market makers at some level, right? So, you know, I've seen people who do like food reviews with millions of followers. The downside to that, again, that's just like pay-per-click. Those people, the way they leverage their network is they make people pay them to talk about their product, right? So you can try it. I would never say don't try it and see how much they're asking for. But a cheaper way to do it is leverage your friends and your friends' friends to help you get more people viewing the post. Right, and here's how the math works, right? So say we have, you know, each person here has 300 people in their network, right? So I post and I get 3 of my friends to post, and in turn they get 3 of their friends to post. That's 4,000 people that will see your post if you can figure out how to get 3 people to work on your behalf, right? Think about how much it would cost you from a PPC point of view to get 4,000 people, right? That's almost $2,000 in AdWords to get an equivalent viewership, right? So this is a different way to do it, and it's like, can you find people who will help you? Can you find 3 people who are willing to help? Meetup is an interesting site for me because what Meetup does is it encourages people to, quote unquote, used to be physically meet up. Now, of course, with COVID, they're doing a lot more video conference. But it's basically people can create groups of shared interest who get together and talk, right? So if I start looking at small business startups, I can quickly do a bunch of searches and find out, oh, look, if I'm focused on this topic area, there's 11,000 people who are attached to these actual meetup groups. My cost is being a member to see what the traffic is in these groups, right? So it's another way to find people who may be candidates for your product or your service. And it's relatively cheap to be part of Meetup. In fact, it's free. All right. So we're getting to the end of our time here. So what I would encourage you to do is when you're on a social site, then the way you're going to leverage this is post, right? So put an article up, put a blog up. And when you do that, make sure that it's easy for someone to go to where you want them to go. Put a link in there back to either your website or your listing so that if they have an interest in following up, it's easy for them to do that, right? And different sites have different mechanisms for posting, right? So in LinkedIn, if you want to put new content up, the easiest way to do it is to put an article up, right? On Facebook and other places, you can just post, right? So social campaigns work. As you can see, 15% of our traffic is from LinkedIn and Facebook, right? So that's a specific result of work that we did, right? We have people who will go out to post, and then we repost. And so we're getting traffic back to our website from that. So when you think about the work we did with SEO and the work we're doing with social media sites, almost 40% of our traffic is generated through these two essentially free but not free mechanisms, right? So this is promotion. It's not the website. It drives traffic to the website. All right, I'm going to kind of summarize, right? So digital marketing provides some lower cost alternatives for promoting your business, right? It all starts, all promotion starts at the same place. Who's the customer? What's your product? And how are you going to get the customer interested in your product? And what's a little different about digital media is we're going to leverage our relationships to run social campaigns, right? And then I'm going to go into the, if you want to know more, there's a whole bunch of us who are willing to help. You can find us at www.mbmentors.org.